If you're ever in the UK, you've got to pay a visit to the Royal Armouries. There, you'll see Henry VIII's foot combat armor, one of the most advanced suits of armor ever built in the Tudor period. Made with care and craft for Henry VIII to wear during the tournament at the Field of the Cloth of Gold. And then nearby is the one he actually wore, because 3 months out, the French changed the rules, making his custom suit ineligible. The armorers scramble to fashion a replacement, a suit of tonlet armor with a wide protective skirt, which is assembled from Flemish and Italian components, the best the armorers could get at such short notice. They etch it with heraldic designs, then gilt it with gold, along with creating a checkerboard pattern on the lames. It's almost perfect. But in the rush, an armorer makes a subtle mistake on the back, breaking the pattern. They do everything in their power to make it fit for a monarch. For it's important that Henry look magnificent, because the king is about to enter a great struggle, but one of spectacle rather than war. This episode is sponsored by the Royal Armouries Museum, one of the oldest museums in the UK. It contains collections of weapons and armor from the medieval era up to present day. And they're celebrating the 500th anniversary of the Field of the Cloth of Gold, an event the Royal Armouries can trace much of its history directly from. June 7th, 1520, the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Cardinal Wolsey has planned this meeting down to the most minute detail. How the kings approach each other, where they stop, how many attendants. Every aspect choreographed perfectly to create equality between Henry and Francis. A balance of respect. It's a tense moment. Francis is coming into English territory, putting his life in Henry's hands. But then Henry is also close enough to French ground that a sudden cavalry charge might catch him. In fact, at one point, the French see light glint off some gold brocade and halt Francis's approach, believing the English are wearing armor. And earlier, there had even been a geopolitical spat over beards. Yeah. As a token of sincerity, the two kings had agreed not to shave until they met. But then Queen Catherine, who hated beards, forced Henry to shave his. So an English diplomat had to explain that the unilateral shaving was a domestic matter, which was an explanation Francis magnanimously accepted. But finally, the day came. The kings met, dismounted, and embraced like brothers. They will make peace by pretending to make war. See, the Field of the Cloth of Gold is not just a diplomatic meeting, but a celebration of the Treaty of Universal Peace. An 18-day party to strengthen this new truce between the old enemies of England and France, and to move toward an alliance. The idea is not just for the kings to meet each other, but to put on a massive, stage-managed production that would be seen through all of Europe. A celebration of glorious peace. And a large part of that was, ironically, to display martial skill. Now sure, there was food and masses and layers of protocol upon protocol, but at the heart of the Field of the Cloth of Gold was the tournament. Henry and Francis essentially celebrated their commitment to peace by fighting a mock war. Which sounds strange, but part of kingship was displaying an ability to conquer. And the whole point of the Treaty of Universal Peace was that if anyone violated it, the other signatories would form a military alliance and crush them. So the Field of the Cloth of Gold was about demonstrating the friendship of these kings and nations, while also at the same time displaying their martial strength, with the implicit threat that they could make war if necessary. Essentially, a massive show to argue that the alliance was not made out of weakness, but strength. There are days of jousts, Henry's favorite, as well as mounted and foot combat. Between the tournaments, the English royal armorers, who'd helped plan and organize the competitions, hammer out dents, replace lances, and straighten bent weapons. But the teams challenging one another are not national ones. To embrace the spirit of the event, each is a mix of French and English nobles. Heck, even the kings fight in mock battles on the same side against teams of challengers. Careful planning ensures that the two monarchs never meet in combat, because that would be too much and eventually lead to bad feeling. Because if these two fight, one must win, and that would upset the careful balance. But despite that caution, comparison is most certainly part of this contest of swords and splendor. And Henry and Francis are locked in a struggle to outdo each other. And that's a struggle that happens on the battlefields of architecture, fashion, and the feasting table. Henry's temporary palace, for example, is deemed the most impressive accommodation. Built on a brick foundation with walls of cloth stretched over a frame and painted to look like stone, he's erected a fully functional palace within 2 months. Complete with a huge stained glass window and a fountain outside that constantly flows with wine. Yum. By contrast, Francis's rival accommodation, a 120-foot-tall gold tent, fell over in a stiff wind before the meeting even began. Point for Henry. On the other hand, Francis has the better-dressed court. His queen and courtiers are garbed in the cutting-edge French fashions that most of the English nobility has never even seen. In fact, it starts a craze for French fashion among Henry's own court. Point for Francis. And each day, after everyone finishes proving they are strong, virile, manly men who are very good at war, but in this case desire peace, the competition moves to the dining table. The food is extravagant. The English drink stores alone consists of 200,000 liters of wine and 66,000 liters of beer. And Wolsey had to get his hands on 2,000 sheep for the feast, along with 13 swans and 3 porpoises. The kings ply each other with rich dishes, fine wines and beers, and delicacies of every imaginable variety. And here, their queens play a vital diplomatic role, because Henry dines in the French camp, hosted by Queen Claude of France, while Catherine of Aragon hosts Francis in the temporary palace. And there must have been a bit of an edge at these meals, because Francis knew, in fact, everyone knew, that his rival Charles V had just paid a visit to Henry and Catherine right before they'd left for France. Charles, who was courting England for an alliance, hoped to draw the English away from cementing relations with France. And he had some pull, too. Queen Catherine was his aunt, and Henry his uncle by marriage. Not to mention with the English textile industry so heavily tied to the Netherlands, one of Charles's many crowns, Francis knew that the English would be tempted to join Charles and turn against him. But the dinners still go splendidly, augmented by theater performances and masquerades. Francis is particularly charmed by Henry's 3 mischievous pet monkeys, who'd been covered in gold leaf for the occasion. There was, however, one diplomatic incident. It's raining, no day for a tournament, so the kings move inside to watch a display of French wrestlers. Then Henry, adrenaline up, and probably having had too much wine fountain, grabs Francis by the collar and challenges him to a match. Oh boy, yeah, they're off script now, and it's Wolsey's worst nightmare. The two monarchs competing directly. They square up. An uneven fight. Henry is bigger, outweighs Francis, has superior, oh wow, okay, and he's already on the floor. Turns out, Francis had trained as a wrestler since he was a boy and knew how to throw a bigger opponent. Henry insists on a rematch. Francis, of course, says no thanks. And though diplomats managed to smooth it over, Henry probably seethed privately. And soon, he gets even. During the archery competition, Henry shows Francis his longbow and suggests the king try it out. It's a provocative act. First, because he knows Francis doesn't have the years of strength training required to draw the bow. And second, because the longbow is a bitter reminder of English victories in the 100 Years' War. Needless to say, Francis is not pleased by the display. Finally, on Saturday, June 23rd, Wolsey gathers the attendees for mass. 6,000 people, the leading nobles of both armies, and thousands of servants. As he closes the ceremony, a great dragon kite flies across the sky. A combination of Francis's symbol of the salamander and Henry's badge of the Welsh dragon, pulled by a cart, mouth afire with pyrotechnics. And with one final day of feasts, it's all over. After 18 days of partying, the sides pack up their tents and head home. And then 2 weeks later, whatever peace they forged is already out the window. Henry met Charles V, a summit that Wolsey had hoped would precipitate an alliance between the 3 rulers, but neither Charles nor Francis could put aside their differences. By the next year, the Treaty of Universal Peace was broken. Charles and Francis were at war, with England formally allying itself with Charles. Turned out the new friendship between Henry and Francis was nothing compared to the economic ties to Charles. So in the end, was the Field of the Cloth of Gold just an expensive failure? "Where be those pleasures now?" wrote a bishop criticizing the endeavor. "They were but shadows, and like shadows they be past. Like shadows they be fled away. Like shadows they be now vanished from us." But that wasn't exactly right. The Field of the Cloth of Gold propelled Henry to the center of European politics, casting him as a power equal to that of France. Not to mention, word of the gathering traveled via printed pamphlets, making it one of the first royal events that people could read about, a forerunner to the public monarchy we have today. And for Henry, it was how he wished to be remembered. Later in life, old, in ill health, and known for his executed wives and break with the Catholic Church, he would commission a painting of the events to see himself once more as a young and vibrant prince at the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Once again, thanks so much to the Royal Armouries for sponsoring this series. One of the oldest museums in the UK, they got their start as the actual armoury in the Tower of London. And currently, they house thousands of weapons, armors, and objects from modern conflicts. Not to mention, they bring history to life every day with their live weapon demos, character performances, and live combat displays. So if that sounds up your alley, and you want to check out the armor we talked about this episode, click the link in the description below and plan a trip there yourself. Though when you do, I can't promise we won't be hiding in your luggage. UK, here we come. Legendary thanks to Ahmed Ziad Turk, Alicia Bramble, Casey Mustia, Dominic Valenciana, Gunnar Clovis, Kyle Murgatroyd, Moulay Chikauri, and Oriels1.